I think this may be the most unexciting color of smartphone I've seen in quite a while, but we'll give it a go. We'll see what it looks like as I unbox the new Pixel 5 5G. This actually turned up about half an hour ago, but I didn't want to waste any time in bringing you this unboxing and quick hands-on. Full review and comparisons and all that good stuff will follow, so make sure you are subscribed. But let's get straight into this and see what we're getting with the new Pixel 5 5G, which has actually sold out online. All the pre-orders are gone, so I'm pretty happy that Google sent me this review sample. So we've got the phone. This is in Sorta Sage, which I will reserve judgment for the moment, but let's come back to that in just a second. And elsewhere in the box, let's have a little look. Got some paperwork from Google there, very exciting. The charger, this is still an 18-watt charger, along with a USB-C to USB-C cable, and a little USB-A to USB-C adapter if you want to transfer your files from an old device. And here it is, the Pixel 5 5G, which you can see looks very similar to the Pixel 4a, and of course also the new Pixel 4a 5G, which I also have here, and I'll be reviewing in a separate video. But the first thing you'll notice is it's a small phone. This is not your typical flagship two-handed device, which you can barely fit in your pocket. This is actually just a 6-inch screen, which by today's standards is pretty small, but I have to say, I really do like this compact size. And then on the back, you'll notice we have this new color, which Google is calling Sorta Sage. The other option is just black, which I think, if I'm honest, is probably the one I would go for. It has this kind of recycled cardboard feel and aesthetic to it. It's actually an aluminium body, but we've got this bio resin on top, which actually helps with the wireless charging and also the reverse wireless charging. So you'll now be able to top up other devices, other phones, or maybe even your fancy new Pixel Buds, which you can see I've not even unwrapped yet, but this will now charge wirelessly from the phone. But what do you think of this new color, Sorta Sage? Would you pick this or just black? Let me know in the comments below. So I say air quotes flagship because this is the Pixel 5, and obviously this is the once a year big new phone from Google, but not this time because Google, I think, have been very smart, or maybe just because they realized no one was really buying the Pixel 4 and the 4 XL, but everyone was buying the 3A, and I think also the 4A is doing pretty well. But offering the combination of an incredible camera with, really slick stock Android software. Obviously this runs Android 11 out of the box, but for a more affordable price tag that maybe would make the flagship Pixel sell a little bit better, or at all. So this is actually just £600, which is 70 less than last year's Pixel 4, and actually a whopping 220 less than last year's 4 XL. And speaking of which, there is no 5 XL, or at least not yet. This is the only Pixel 5 phone on offer, so if you do want a bigger screen Pixel, then, well, you're out of luck. So to give you some context, the new Pixel 5 costs £600, whereas the new Pixel A 5G costs £500, so there's a £100 difference there. And then imagine I have the Pixel 4a, the standard one here, that costs $350. So $350, $500, $600. So let's run through the specs. Why is this so cheap? Well, the main compromise is the processor. Rather than the flagship Snapdragon 865, we actually get a Snapdragon 765, which of course is 5G, as it says quite literally on the tin. So the 765 obviously isn't quite as powerful as the top-end chips, but of course along with stock Android 11 here, everything still feels super fast and responsive, which is exactly what you want from a Pixel phone. So as I mentioned, 6-inch screen, it is still a 90 Hz refresh rate, and actually if we jump into the display settings, where is it? There we go. Go to advanced and smooth display. So you can't actually change anything other than just turning it off, but you can see it does switch between 90 to 60 Hz depending on what you're looking at. So it's 90 Hz and it is an OLED screen. So watching videos and movies looks great on this. And also compared to the Pixel 4 from last year and the 4 XL, the bezels are much smaller. It's very, very similar this to the 4A. If I turn it up, obviously speaking in Japanese, I can't understand a word of it, but we do kind of have stereo speakers. This one at the bottom is much louder, but it also seems like we have an under-screen speaker here because there's no obvious grill, and it's certainly not as loud coming from this side. So you're not getting a fully even stereo effect, but it is certainly better than just a single speaker firing out the bottom. We also get Gorilla Glass 6 on the front, we get IP68 water resistance, and as I say, being such a relatively small phone, it weighs just 151 grams, and it's just 8mm thick. So if you are a fan of one-handed use phones, then I think you're gonna love this. We also get this rear fingerprint reader rather than in screen one, which quite honestly, I'm okay with, and I think given the size of the phone, when you pick it up, your index finger kind of rests there anyways, and I think this will be more reliable than just a basic optical reader here. This is kind of silly. I've got this obviously front camera here, I've got another one above me, and I like this plant being here for the front shot, but then the vertical shot's a bit boring, so I like to bring that in just for a bit of color. So between the shots, between my takes, I keep moving this plant back and forth. There must be an easier way. Anyway, back to the Pixel, and along with the Snapdragon 765, we also get 8 gigs of RAM and 128 storage. There's just the one SKU, there's no other storage or RAM options. Now, as you guys know, last year's Pixel 4 and 4 XL, one of the biggest criticisms, well, that I had at least, was with the battery life. Out of the box, it was pretty bad actually. Credit where credit's due, it did improve over time. I went from having like 20% of my battery left at the end of the day to about 35 after a month or so. So, you know, the AI, machine learning stuff that happens behind the scenes, it did improve the battery life for me. And I'm sure we'll see the same with the Pixel 5, but importantly, they have put in a bigger battery. We've got a 4080 milliamp hour battery, which is up from the 3700 milliamp hour battery on last year's 4 XL. That was the bigger version, and yet this still has a bigger battery. And of course, that was also Quad HD and 90 Hz. So bigger battery, and also because this is Full HD Plus rather than Quad HD Plus, and I think also along with probably some software optimizations, I'm expecting this to be actually pretty decent for battery life, although of course that's something I'll test properly for my full review. And finally, we have the camera, which I think for me, well, I think most people, is the biggest reason to buy a Pixel phone, aside from maybe just the stock Android software. Now, the big addition this year is the fact that we get an ultra-wide lens. You can see it's zooming out to 0.6 times. So they've actually swapped having the telephoto lens from the Pixel 4 to the ultra-wide on the Pixel 5, which is a bit of a shame that we can't have all three like we do on a lot of phones, but I think most people would agree that the ultra-wide is more important, is more useful. And actually, when I tested the 4A, the digital zoom is actually very impressive. It's got one of the best sort of AI hybrid zooms out there. So even though it hasn't got a dedicated telephoto lens, it's certainly better than most phones when it comes to a digital zoom. But aside from the new ultra-wide, the hardware itself is pretty much identical to the Pixel 4. We've still got a 12 megapixel f1.7 main lens. Of course, we now have this new 16 megapixel f2.2. Video still tops out at 4K 60, although the front camera here still only shoots at 1080p 30, which is a bit disappointing. 4K 30 would have been nice. And this is an 8 megapixel f2.0 selfie camera. So of course this is just an unboxing video, and like the battery life, I'll also be testing the camera properly for my full review, but I don't expect it to be that much better really at all than say the Pixel 4a, although of course we do have the benefit of that ultra-wide lens. So altogether then, we've got smaller bezels, this new Salted Sage color, of course this now supports 5G, we've got the new Snapdragon 765 chip, which while newer is probably technically a step down from even the Pixel 4's 855, although I have to run some tests and benchmarks myself to see how they compare. Android 11 out of the box, although of course you can always upgrade your current Pixel phone right now to Android 11, and I think probably most importantly, a bigger battery, that 4080 mAh cell. But of course, being £600, there are a few compromises, which makes this a bit more sort of upper mid-range than proper flagship. For example, as I say, there's only 128 gigs of storage, you can't get 256 or anything else. It's also UFS 2.1, not UFS 3 or 3.1, so the storage is also a little bit slower. There's no Wi-Fi 6, there's no Bluetooth 5.1, and there's still no super fast charging or anything, it's still 18 watts. But first impressions, honestly, I love this thing. I love the size, I love Android 11, the camera's great, and finally have that ultra-wide lens, and the fact that they have put some effort into improving the battery life, I think is going to really pay off. This is kind of like the ultimate Pixel phone, and it doesn't cost an absolute fortune, which I think is probably the best thing they've done in a long time. I do kind of wish there were more color options. I'm still not a fan of this Salted Sage. And also maybe an XL or 5XL would have been good to see, even if it was £100 more, but just to have a bigger screen size option and perhaps a little bit more storage, that would have been nice. But what do you reckon? Do you think Google's made one too many compromises with this? And do you think the competition's got stronger and maybe the Pixel 5 will struggle to stand out? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and make sure you have hit that subscribe button and stay tuned, because next week I'll have my Galaxy S20 FE versus OnePlus 8T versus Pixel 5 video, which I can't wait to show you. That's going to be a good one, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys next time right here on the Tech Chat.